Hello everybody, I'm out in another field here, again west of Russell around Victoria, and this is another field where we have a stripper well up there, probably making 1.5 barrels a day, and my job is to go through here and find some type of a secondary feature so we can take this HBP lease and boost its production back up. I wanted to try to do a little demo here and show you how the HMPA system responds to an oil reservoir. This is not an ideal test because this is a very weak well. It's on a small structure, but we're going to see if we can see any elevation in the HMPA signal as we approach that well. So what I do typically is a grid study when I do a field survey, but here we're just going to run a straight line to that well, and we're going to stop about every 150 feet and take a reading, and we're going to establish what a baseline level is on our software here, and that may be 550, it may be 470. We'll know by the time we get a few samples taken here. When we pick up whatever reservoir remains around that well, we're going to see that number jump above that background level by anywhere from 30 to 40 points on the weak side to as much as 100 points if that's a real stout reservoir. Now, on these stripper wells where we tend to see the most residual reservoir is not at the pumping unit, and I'll explain that in a minute, but typically within about 400 feet radius of the pumping unit is where we'll kind of get a ring of residual reserves, and that will be a series of maybe 2 or 3 elevated samples, and then as we get right up against the pumping unit we may see no response at all, and that's due to 2 things. One can be depletion. The other more likely explanation for that is that you have a big chunk of iron there with essentially a 4,000 foot ground rod hooked to it, being the rods and tubing, and so that acts as kind of a damper to the electrical field within about a 200 feet radius of that pumping unit. Remember, this is an electrical technology. What we're doing here is we have a sensor pack mounted under the truck. It's gathering up this electronic signal in a fairly wide band. It's sending that signal to an interface unit, and then from there it goes to this software that we had our staff engineer design on a LabVIEW platform. And what happens is every time I stop and take a sample, we're going to run a 120-second scan, and within that time frame we should be able to acquire and analyze the signal that we're looking for, and that's what this software is doing. It's doing a lot of math and a lot of analysis to that signal coming from the sensor pack, but ultimately what it does is it kicks out a number up here, and that's the one that we're really watching. So we've really simplified the system over the years. We didn't used to have software. We had multiple instruments that are doing the job that the software does by itself now. So I'm going to back up a little bit farther from that well because I want to get a really good handle on what our background levels are going to be here. And please stick with the video. I can't make it any shorter than it's going to be because of the amount of time we have to spend at each sample point. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off our first scan here at this sample point. If I can find my cursor, I'm using a laptop that is a temporary laptop because my other one died on me out in West Texas. So anyway, we're going to start our scan, and we'll see that number. Oops, my inverter's on. Lesson number 1, you cannot run an inverter and run this tool at the same time. So we'll start that again. We're going to see that number slowly start to build. The timer's counting down the scan time as we sit here. This is not a really productive area here. The wells that have been found around here tend to be pretty tight and pretty marginal producers even out of the gate. So I don't know what kind of a response we're going to get by that well, and honestly I have not been over it yet to know what to expect, but we'll see what we get. HMPA was actually discovered, I would say, back in 2008, where I just took a bunch of electronic instruments out and started studying existing reservoirs. Electronics is my background, but I've also had a profound interest in oil exploration methods, primarily non-conventional ones, and I've tried them all. I've tried radar and satellite imaging and soil gas analysis. I cultured my own hydrocarbon eating microbes. I've tried about everything, and nothing has matched this technology here. And it basically is a combination of taking my interest in oil exploration and my skills as an electronics guy and marrying those two up and developing this system. It's been a very successful system. I've been making a good living on it now for well, going on 6 years now. Before that, there was about 3 years of nothing but research and development. So anyway, we got 16 seconds to go, and that 450 number there is typically what I was seeing yesterday in another study as a baseline reading. So if we pick up any kind of a hint of an oil reservoir, I'm expecting that to get to 500 or maybe even higher than that, depending on what's left around that unit. So we're just gonna nudge up here. Watch my GPS odometer here. We'll go about 150 feet. And we'll start another scan. Every sample that I take gets marked with the GPS. Typically we space our samples apart 200 feet if we're looking for structures. If we're looking for arbuckle structures or other limestone structures that, you know, we're wanting to be 600 feet in diameter, we should easily be able to pick those up on a sample spacing of 200 or even 250 feet. When we go out in West Texas and we're looking for Tanny Hill, reefs, and channels, some of that stuff can be really narrow, and we need to reduce our spacing down to as short as 100 feet. And so we end up with a lot more samples, and it takes a lot more time to do the study, but it's something you just have to do to trace out these features. That can be very narrow but very prolific producers. And you know, with the Morrow channels here in Kansas and the Bartlesville, some of the sands out in eastern Kansas, the Layton, which it can be structural, but it can also be stratigraphic. Some of those features can be very narrow, at least their signature on the surface can be very narrow. But man, as we all know, sand wells can be great producers, and even when they're not that big as far as width goes. So that's the great thing about this instrument, is there's not a lot of tools out there that can find those. 3D in some cases, if it's a deep enough channel, can see the channel, but it can't determine if it's got a hydrocarbon in it or not. So that's what we're doing with this. We got 18 seconds to go, 17, and it looks like we're going to end up back with another barren reading right at that 450 mark. And I'm making one other assumption, and that is that we started over a place where there is no oil. And from the readings that I'm seeing here, we don't have any, at least not in the last two sample points. So we're going to nudge up here. Another 150. Maybe we'll just go 100. We're getting closer to that unit than I realized. And we'll see what we get on this one. So I'm going to start the scan. Not every sample point will pick up the signal that we're looking for, and the reason for that is it's not a constantly occurring signal. It occurs at irregular intervals, and I run a 2-minute scan just because typically if it's there, it's going to occur in that time frame. Sometimes I'll run my scans a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit slower. Just depends on what I'm getting into. The great thing about this tool is I can tell in real time in the field if I'm getting into something, and kind of know on areas I need to look at a little bit closer. Maybe after I complete the first pass of a study, I'll go back to an area that looked positive and catch some more samples around that area and kind of try to fill in the study with a little better resolution and get a better idea of what I've got. So we're halfway through, we got a minute left, and see, we got a little kick there to a 487. That could very well be the start of picking up a little bit of oil left around that guy. If it jumps up to a 500 or a little bit better, that would be a better indication of it. But we did get a little bit of a bump there. 35 seconds to go. See, there's a 495, so we're in it now. I would be surprised to see numbers much better than 500 or 510 on this well, as weak as it is. But then you never know, you know, was that well drilled on top of the high and that high was tight? Maybe the better reservoir's off on the flank, which would be where we're sitting now, basically. But anyway, it looks like we're going to end at that 495. And so I'm just going to barely eke up here and see if we can beat that number. Because we're going to get within that 200 feet radius of that unit. Where, like I told you, we're going to be in a dead zone. But we're not there yet. We're starting our scan here. It's not a particularly nice day. I had a sunny day yesterday. I had the windows down, and but still no snow, so everything's going to be fine. I'll finish up this quarter today, and then tomorrow I need to move into Ellis County, and then after that over into Barton County, and then I'm going home for a while before I have to return to West Texas and chase sands. So we're scanning here, got 82 seconds to go. Looks like we may not get as good a reading as we did back there. That may have been as good as it's going to get, but we'll see. As I said, not every sample will catch the anomaly. There we jumped to a 470, which is still above those 450s we were getting back there. These are not readings I would ever drill on, but for demonstration purposes, hopefully you'll be able to see how we get a response around that pumping unit, which is basically sitting on a small 3D high. There's a 482 with 24 seconds to go. When you cross over a sand channel or reef with this thing, it's just fantastic because you get 2 or 3 anomalous samples over the top of it, and you will be dead before that, you'll be dead after it, and it's just like taking candy from a baby, tracing those channels and reefs out. So 482, still what I would call elevated. We'll nudge up here just a little bit more, and then we're probably going to be getting into the area of that dead zone I talked to you about. See what we get here. We can also turn around and come at this well from a couple other directions. That can also tell us, by the way, if there's residual oil left around this well, we can tell which direction the most residual reserves reside in. In other words, is the greater residual reserves accumulated to the east, west, north, or south? And we can kind of tell that just by making a circle around this well and taking some samples up. So we got quite a long ways to go yet, 75 seconds. So reviewing what we had so far, we started back there, we had a 450, a 450, and I believe a 495, which has been our best signal. And I believe that last one was around a 480, somewhere in there. So we've had a couple elevated samples. And we'll see if on this one here, we're either going to get another high sample, or we're going to drop way off, and that just depends on the grounding effect of that pumping unit. If it drops off here, we'll take a couple sample points on each side of that unit and see if we can find maybe a little sweet spot around this well. And then I'll just drive way out away from it again and give you one more sample point to show what it's like when we're not detecting any oil reservoir depth. So we're going to go back down here, back to that 450 range, I have a feeling. And so that little ring, that 495 and that 480 whatever back there, that was what's left of the reservoir around this well, at least to the east of the unit. So let's go up here and catch a sample on the north side and see if maybe we got a little better residual reserves here over on the north side. So I'm right even with the unit now on the north side of it. I would never do a study like this for a customer as far as trying to locate drill sites. Yeah, now see, there's a 489, which is anomalous, but weakly anomalous. Again, numbers I'm looking for, I think our background level here is probably around 450, so I'm wanting to see, for really stud wells, I'm wanting to see that number jump up to about a 550 or higher. Mildly anomalous is going to be in that 500 to 530 range, and then weakly anomalous is going to be like that 480 to 490, where we're just kind of picking up a little bit of, there we go. that's a little better reading there. So already I would say that we've got more residual reserves on the north side of this well than we do the east. We're outside of that ring of influence. It doesn't look like it, but we're probably right at 200 feet to the north of that unit. I can't get a western sample because we're fenced in here. There's a fence around that pumping unit, but we'll get one on the south side, see how much oil we got left on the south side. Kicked up a little bit higher yet to that 528. So when I run through this field on a grid pattern, which I'm going to do after we finish this video, I'll be taking a whole grid sample, a whole grid pattern of samples, and then the whole picture really comes together, and you see everything that you want to know about this reservoir and other potential reservoirs that might reside on the quarter. So we got a 528 there, which is the best so far we've got. So we'll swing around this fence here, get on the south side of this guy. It's an amazing instrument in that you can drive around in your truck and in an afternoon study a quarter section to determine if it's got a drill site on it or not. I don't know of a lot of instruments you can do that with. You don't have to get out of the truck and drill holes, dig holes. I mean, this is not a micro seepage related tool. This is electrical, so it's sensing exactly what's going on beneath the truck. So now we're going, we're about 200 feet south of the unit. I just started my scan. I have not seen the 3D, so I don't know what shape this structure is, but I have been told it's a fairly small one, and I know that the well is a very marginal producer at this point. Micro seepage tools like geochem, satellite imaging, even soil gas sampling, all of those things rely on micro seepage coming up from an oil reservoir depth, and that is a reality. I've done enough work with some technologies related to that I know it's a true phenomenon, and it can be helpful. The problem is that it's riddled with false positives. There's all kinds of other things that will mimic migrating hydrocarbon gases from an oil reservoir. Then you may actually be seeing the effects of a migrating hydrocarbon gas, but it may not be from a productive oil reservoir. It may be shallow methane. It may be Niobrara gas, something that, you know, has nothing to do with the reservoir that you're chasing. And then thirdly, if those gases do migrate to the surface from an oil reservoir depth, they don't always come up straight. So you may have the signature, and then the actual reservoir may be 600 feet away in terms of vertical depth. So you may drill your well, if you base your drill site on that technology, you may drill your well 600 feet away from where it should be. This is an electrical technology. The electricity doesn't bend or go sideways. The sensor pack under the truck is detecting exactly what's going on underneath the truck at depth, and with pretty fantastic resolution. You know, I would say our resolution's about 100 feet on this technology, and that's better than 3D. So we ended up 459 here, so you know, that doesn't look to me like we got much of anything left on the south side of this well. And I'm gonna go over, just so you all don't think I'm rigging this up somehow, I'm gonna see if we can duplicate a higher reading on this north side before we shut this demo video down. It would appear that the north side is where the remaining action is. So if you look in my mirror, you might be able to see that well back there. But we're going to kick one more sample off here and see if we can verify that that's where that we're over the best part that's left of that reservoir. We're 105 seconds left. A lot of people want to call this, oh, it's just another black box, and a lot of guys have been bit by using black box technologies. There's a lot of them out there. And that's one of the reasons that we take people on ride-alongs. A lot of times I'll have a guy sitting right behind me, and he'll be watching my laptop as we drive up to a producing well, and he can see for himself. You know, he can see the instrument respond for himself, and it's a real-time way of seeing what's going on for themselves. So it sells them on the technology. So we've got about a minute to go here. Seconds. And remember, as I said, we won't catch that transient at every sample point, but I know that 525 was legitimate. So if we don't get it here, I'm going to take one more sample point on this side and see if we can get another high reading in on this north side. That's another reason why you have to take clusters of samples, because there's always about 20% of the samples that are non-responsive that just get tossed out. So this scan is not going to catch that thing. Let's turn around and see where we're at in terms of orientation. About where we got that the last time, I thought. So we'll run one more scan and see if it makes a liar of me. But yeah, if you're doing just a row of samples and you have a couple that for whatever reason don't catch that signal, you're row, your one line sample pattern can become useless. But if you've got a whole cluster across an area, then you know your rogue samples when you get the entire set put together, and you toss those out. It's nothing nefarious about that. It's just that the signal does not occur at regular intervals, as I said, and you're just looking for clusters of samples where you have maybe 70 or 80% of them are anomalous, and then once you get to that point, you can kind of run over that hot area again, take some more samples, and kind of start filling in the blanks, and then the whole picture kind of starts becoming complete. And it's kind of like a mystery, and it's fun using this thing out here, especially when you see yourself getting into something. If you're going across a barren tract, sometimes it can be pretty boring because you're just getting baseline readings all the way across the tract. But when you think you're getting into something and you see it in real time, it can be really exciting, a real exciting thing to see. So we've got about 40 seconds to go. This old dog's not gonna hunt again here, I don't think. I don't think we're too close to that unit, but what we'll do here is I'm gonna back up just a little bit farther, get a little bit farther away from that unit. We should be able to repeat that. There it is. There's a 510. So that's, the only two 500 readings we got have been north of that well. And so that tells me the most residual reserves we have are on the north side of this unit, but that number is not a productive number. That is typically a 1 barrel a day number. So just again to compare these numbers, the 500 numbers, let's just drive back out here in the middle of no man's land so that y'all can see, we drop back down into that 450, 460 range. We're going to get away from that reservoir completely. Back up here where I believe we started this whole thing. Hopefully we'll find another well in here, because anytime you can find some residual oil on a HBP lease, it's a plus. You've already got infrastructure in place. So I just started a scan here, and we should not see any 500s up here unless we're lucky enough that we just happen to be sitting right over an unexploited reservoir, but I doubt that's the case. All I need to be able to do your survey is I need to be able to drive across the tract in this 3/4 ton pickup. It's very non-invasive. I never get out of the truck. I never drill a hole. I have done stuff in West Texas on an ATV because there's a lot of mesquite bushes and stuff out there that you just can't get a truck through. So we use that out there. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's going to be a necessity as we continue to move into areas out in West Texas where we're chasing these sand channels and reefs. So we got 52 seconds to go. And if this thing beats a 460, I'll buy everybody that's watching this thing a pizza. Please don't jump. 30 seconds to go. $20 seconds. I think I'm going to get off the hook here, guys. I think we're on a dead spot here. So if you want to rewatch this video, I'd encourage you to write down all the readings that we took as we moved toward that unit and back away from it and off to each side. Up, there's a 494. I gotta buy everybody pizza. And that is definitely still now it's got me curious. That is a indication that we're still picking up something off of this reservoir here. Made me curious enough that I'm gonna pull up here and run another one. Dang. Well, maybe we'll see how many of you watch this and claim the pizza. Because I'm 30 minutes into this video, and we'll have to see how many of you get 30 minutes into it without hanging up on me. So there we are. We're a little bit more southeast of the unit right now. I was surprised that we got that 495 back there, but that was a slightly anomalous reading there. Not gonna lie to you. Didn't expect to get it. It's not a 494, or it's not 500 or 525, but I still think our baseline reading around here is probably a 460. And there must have been a little bit of oil left back there. Kind of inching up again. So I want to get this thing back down into what I think is a baseline level. So we're gonna move a little bit farther away from this unit. And I can't remember if there's been any dry holes drilled on this track. That would have been a good place to go, to sit right over a dry hole. But then you shouldn't be picking anything up unless somebody screwed up the test. So, if we end up with a 470 here and a 494, again, very mildly anomalous signals. The ones that probably stand out to me are the 511 and the 525. So let's kick this thing. We'll go away since we already seem like going to the south of the well. Everything died on us. And we've got a topographic low down here. Maybe that's a surface impression of a low. Let's see if we die way down here south of this well. Probably 330 feet, something like that from it. So we'll run a scan here. I've had guys go with me and they'll say, well, you got a high reading there, but you didn't get one over there. Why the discrepancy? And I'll tell you what happened there is my inverter kicked on. So let me move up here. That is an error signal right there when you get a saturation reading like that. Any type of electrical noise or static will just drive this thing nuts. So I repositioned the truck, flipped off the inverter, and I'm going to start the scan over. Anyway, there's nothing nefarious or defective in the instrument when you don't have consistently high samples around a producer. There's nothing nefarious about that. It's just that it does not every sample point will be anomalous, even when you're over an oil reservoir, but the majority of them will be. And so I guarantee you that if we do a grid, over this, tract, we're gonna see an anomalous, I guess it won't be red, maybe yellow feature over that old producer. But intermingled in that cluster of samples, there's going to be some that aren't anomalous, and those are going to get tossed out. And that's why it's so important to take as many readings as possible. The more readings you get, the more accurate your study is going to be, and the better your results are going to be. So we got about 30 seconds left. We'll see what we get over here. So far we're sitting at a 429, which is on a very low side. .440, which is, that's where we're going to end. 442, which again is a very barren reading. So I'm going to run one more, just so y'all can see we do get some consistency here on these barren readings. Start that scan. Sometimes when I do an initial study and I'm using some fairly wide sample spacings, if I get just one anomalous sample, just one, that reads abnormally high, say 100 points over baseline, I have to take that point seriously, and that becomes an area of interest where I may take, you know, another cluster of sample space closer together, run my rows different directions, and two things are going to happen. I'm either going to get more readings around that point and it's going to turn into something, or it's simply going to end up that sample point was just an abnormal rogue. It may have picked up a little spike of static electricity off the truck, off of this is an extremely sensitive receiver, and it has to be, because the signal that we're looking for is very, very small, very weak, and so the slightest electrical noise can corrupt these readings, and that's why it took years of shielding the hardware, years of building in filters in the software to get this signal to noise ratio down to the point that this thing can see that little signal and 99% of the time reject things that we don't want to see. And so we're at 34 seconds to go, and you can see we're nowhere near those 500 readings we were getting over there, particularly on the north side of the unit. I don't know why my picture's so blurry over there, but so hopefully this gave you an idea of how this thing works. This is what I do when guys go with me on ride-alongs. They sit behind me and they see this thing, you know, work for themselves. So we're going to end up at a 462 here, which 450, 460 to me is baseline reading in here, which is basically a barren reading. So review the readings that we took and ask yourself, out of all the readings we took out here, away and up against that well, we got a 525 and a 511 and a 494. Where did they happen at? They happened, you know, within 200 feet of that pumping unit. That wasn't a coincidence, guys. This thing is picking up an electrical signal that is created by what I believe is a interaction with the hydrocarbon producing a voltage very much in the way that a battery produces a voltage. I believe that what we have down there essentially is a battery. What does a battery do? It converts chemical energy to electrical energy. And it's perfectly plausible, given the amount of energy that's in a hydrocarbon, that this can be happening. That we have chemical reactions going on down there that are essentially, the hydrocarbon is an essential part of that, creates the voltage. The voltage then, as it radiates to the surface, encounters all kinds of different mineralogical interfaces that mimic what used to be known and still is a crystal diode, which acts as a modulator. And every time the voltage hits one of those mineralogical interfaces coming up, it creates a little tiny signal, and those all kind of start occurring together and clustered together, and that's where I believe we're getting the signal from. So it's certainly understandable how this can work, especially having an electronics background. I certainly do, and I've had enough guys drill successful wells using this technology to know that it works, and I've had enough guys drill wells where I told them not to drill, and they did anyway and got dry holes, to know how it works. So first of all, put me to work, and let's keep you from wasting $170,000 to $200,000 by drilling a totally barren well Secondly, let me help you with 3D or without it, whatever you want to do. Let's pick the best location we can find, because at these prices, you need to get the best production out of your test that you can possibly get. So thanks for enduring this video. This nothing rigged here. This is a real-time, unedited 35-minute, 40-minute demonstration of what I do. And now I'm going to let y'all go and kick off this study and get my grid pattern going. If you're interested in our technology, give us a call or visit the website at www.riskreductiontechnologies.com. As always, everybody have good luck out there in the oil fields.